Hey guys, tonight we begin with dust, blood, and the bitter taste of reality. Welcome to the American Wild West, where Hollywood's romanticized cowboys and showdowns at high noon meet the brutal truth of survival in one of the most unforgiving periods in American history. Forget the noble gunslingers and heroic sheriffs you've seen on screen. The truth is, you probably wouldn't last a single day. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in Dodge City, Kansas, in 1875. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, everything else. Your bed is a thin straw mattress in a boarding house that smells like a combination of unwashed bodies, horse manure, and whatever died under the floorboards last month. There's no memory foam, no Egyptian cotton sheets, just a wool blanket that's been shared by dozens of previous tenants and hasn't been washed since the Lincoln administration. You blink awake as a gunshot echoes through the morning air. It's not an alarm clock, it's Tuesday. The sun isn't gently filtering through curtains, it's blazing through a single grimy window that hasn't been cleaned since it was installed. Your room is a wooden box, barely big enough for a bed and a wash basin that contains water so brown, you're not sure if it's supposed to be tea. The smell, oh, the smell. It's a symphony of human misery. A blend of stale tobacco, sweat, livestock, and something that might be breakfast but could just as easily be what's left of someone who crossed the wrong person yesterday. There's no air conditioning, no fan, just the oppressive heat of a prairie summer that turns your room into a wooden oven. You try to stretch but immediately regret it because your joints ache from sleeping on what amounts to a bag of rocks. The floorboards creak ominously under your weight, and you're pretty sure something just scurried across your foot. It's either a rat or someone's breakfast making a break for freedom. Getting dressed is an adventure in itself. Your clothes are whatever you could afford or steal. A cotton shirt that's seen better decades, pants held up by suspenders because belts are a luxury, and boots that were probably made for someone with different shaped feet. But they're your boots now, and you'll wear them until they fall apart. Or you do, whichever comes first. And speaking of personal hygiene, that's a concept the Wild West hadn't quite figured out yet. You're sharing that brown water with everyone else in the building, assuming anyone bothers to wash at all. Most people change their clothes when the smell becomes unbearable to others, not themselves. Welcome to your first morning in the Wild West, where the coffee is strong, the life expectancy is short, and your chances of seeing another sunrise depend entirely on your ability to navigate a world where violence is currency and mercy is a luxury most people can't afford. So you've crawled out of your straw-filled nightmare, and now nature calls. But here's the thing, in the Wild West, answering nature's call is less about privacy and more about survival. There's no bathroom down the hall, no indoor plumbing, no toilet paper, and definitely no reading material unless you count the wanted posters someone might have left behind. If you're lucky, your boarding house has an outhouse out back. It's a wooden shack about the size of a coffin, built over a pit that hasn't been cleaned since the town was founded. The smell hits you like a physical blow from 50 feet away. It's the kind of odor that makes your eyes water and your stomach question every life choice that led you to this moment. The door hangs askew on rusty hinges and doesn't close properly, which means privacy is more of a suggestion than a reality. Inside, you'll find a wooden seat with a hole cut in it, positioned over an abyss of human waste that seems to go down to the center of the earth. The walls are covered in graffiti ranging from crude drawings to philosophical musings about the meaning of life when you're knee-deep in other people's business. And the creatures, oh the creatures. Flies the size of small birds buzz angrily around your head. Spiders have claimed territories in the corners. Rats scurry beneath the floorboards, and occasionally, something larger rustles in the pit below. You try not to think about what that might be. Toilet paper. What's that? You make do with whatever's available. Corn cobs if you're lucky. Old newspaper if someone's feeling generous. Leaves if you're desperate. And if you're really unlucky, well, let's just say you learn to appreciate the simple things in life, like having feeling in your fingertips. But here's the real kicker. Privacy is a myth. Everyone in town knows when you're in the outhouse because it's the only building that creaks that loudly. People walk by and offer commentary on your business, both literally and figuratively. You might be trying to concentrate on not falling into the pit and suddenly hear, "Hey Jim, sounds like you had the beans again last night." And if you're a woman, congratulations. You get to do all of this while wearing a dress that weighs approximately 40 pounds and trying to maintain some semblance of dignity in a world that has very little of it to spare. You also get to worry about the additional dangers that come with being isolated and vulnerable in a place where law enforcement is more of a suggestion than a reality. The entire experience is a daily reminder that survival in the Wild West isn't about quick draws or cattle rustling. It's about basic human functions becoming exercises in endurance, humiliation, and the kind of intestinal fortitude you never knew you'd need. And when you're done, you emerge from that wooden torture chamber forever changed. You've crossed a threshold. You're no longer the person who went in. You're someone who understands that in the Wild West, even the most basic human needs become battles against nature, society, and your own sense of dignity. But hey, at least you survived the outhouse. Now, let's see if you can survive breakfast. You survived the outhouse. You deserve a medal, but you'll settle for food. Something to fill the gnawing emptiness in your stomach and maybe wash the taste of despair out of your mouth. Unfortunately, this is the Wild West, where food is less about nutrition and more about not dying of starvation. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is served in the saloon downstairs. It's not a restaurant, it's a room full of tables where men who haven't bathed since Easter gathered to consume substances that might technically qualify as food. You sit down at a wooden table that's sticky with spilled whiskey, blood, and whatever that brown stain is that nobody talks about. Your breakfast consists of hardtack, biscuits so dense they could stop a bullet. In fact, some people use them as building materials. The coffee is strong enough to dissolve spoons and tastes like someone filtered it through a saddle. It's black, not because they don't have milk, but because the milk went bad sometime during the Buchanan administration. If you're lucky, there might be some salt pork, strips of preserved pig that have the consistency of leather and taste like salt lick. The eggs, assuming they haven't spoiled in the heat, are fried in grease that's been reused so many times it's achieved sentience and is planning its escape. Beans are a staple, partly because they're cheap and partly because they're one of the few foods that actually improve with age, even if that age is measured in geological time periods. The beans are cooked in a pot that hasn't been properly cleaned since it was forged. They're seasoned with whatever spices could be found, which usually means salt and the dreams of better times. Fresh fruit is a fantasy. Fresh vegetables are a myth. If you see something green on your plate, it's either mold or an insect that took a wrong turn. Everything else has been preserved, dried, salted, or pickled to the point where its original identity is a matter of philosophical debate. The water is brown. Sometimes it's supposed to be brown. Sometimes it's brown because it's been sitting in a barrel next to a dead horse for 3 weeks. You learn not to ask questions. You learn to be grateful when it doesn't move on its own. Milk, when available, comes from cows that have been grazing on whatever they could find in the desert, which means the milk tastes like dust, disappointment, and cow regret. It's often sour and occasionally chunky, but it's liquid And it's not obviously poisonous, so you drink it. And the meat, when there is meat, it's whatever somebody shot the night before. Sometimes it's beef, sometimes it's deer. Sometimes it's something nobody wants to identify, but everyone's too hungry to refuse. You learn to chew carefully and swallow quickly. The dining experience is enhanced by the ambient sounds of men spitting tobacco juice into brass spittoons, the occasional gunshot from the street, and the gentle sobbing of your digestive system as it tries to process what you've just consumed. But here's the thing, this isn't just breakfast. This is fuel. This is what's going to power you through a day of back-breaking labor, extreme weather, and the constant threat of violence or disease. Every bite is a gamble. Every swallow is an act of faith. You wash it all down with more of that coffee and try not to think about what your stomach is going to do to you later. Because in the Wild West, food poisoning isn't just an inconvenience, it's a potential death sentence. And the nearest doctor is 3 days' ride away, assuming he's sober. Welcome to Frontier Cuisine, where every meal is an adventure, and not all adventures have happy endings. So you've choked down your breakfast, and now it's time to figure out what to wear. Because in the Wild West, fashion isn't about looking good, it's about not dying. Your wardrobe is determined entirely by function, survival, and whatever you could afford or steal. Let's start with the basics. You have one set of clothes. One, that's it. No seasonal wardrobe, no casual Friday outfit, no special occasion wear. Just one set of garments that you'll wear every single day until they disintegrate, or you do, whichever comes first. Your shirt is made of cotton or wool, depending on what you could find. It's rough, scratchy, and has been worn by you and possibly several previous owners without being washed. The collar is stiff with accumulated sweat and grime. The sleeves are rolled up because it's either too hot or because they're the wrong length for your arms. Your pants are held up by suspenders because belts are expensive and suspenders are practical. They're made of canvas or denim, material so thick it could stop a knife. They're also stiff, uncomfortable, and designed by someone who apparently thought human legs were shaped like tree trunks. The pockets are deep enough to hold your life savings, which amounts to $3 and a button you found. Your boots are the most important part of your outfit. They're made of leather so thick it could stop a bullet. They're also designed to protect your feet from rattlesnakes, scorpions, rocks, cactus spines, and whatever else the desert wants to stick into your flesh. The only problem is they were made for someone else's feet, possibly someone of a different species. Breaking in boots in the Wild West is a special kind of torture. You develop blisters on top of blisters. Your feet swell to twice their normal size, and every step feels like walking on broken glass. But you wear them anyway because the alternative is going barefoot in a landscape designed to punish exposed skin. Your hat isn't a fashion statement, it's survival equipment. It protects your head from the sun, keeps the dust out of your eyes, and provides a small amount of protection if someone tries to hit you with something. It's made of felt or straw, depending on your budget, and has been shaped by weather, wear, and whatever happened that time you had to use it to carry water. If you're a woman, congratulations, your outfit is even more complicated. You get to wear a dress that weighs approximately 40 pounds, is made of material that traps heat, and makes even simple tasks like walking and exercise in endurance management. You also get a corset, which is basically a torture device designed to restrict breathing and circulation. The dress covers you from neck to ankle, not for modesty, but because exposed skin in the desert sun means third-degree burns. The fabric is thick enough to stop most insects and thin enough that you'll sweat through it before noon. The sleeves are long, the neckline is high, and the whole thing makes you look like a walking tent. Undergarments are optional, partly because they're expensive, and partly because adding more layers to an already oppressive outfit seems like a form of masochism. If you do have them, they're made of cotton or linen and are about as comfortable as wearing a hair shirt. Everyone's clothes are stained. Dust, sweat, blood, and substances you'd rather not identify have created a permanent patina on every garment. You learn to judge the age of a stain by its color and texture. Fresh stains are red or brown. Old stains are black and permanent. Washing clothes is a major production. You need water, soap, and time, all of which are in short supply. Most people just air out their clothes overnight and hope for the best. Some people turn their shirts inside out when they get too ripe, figuring that counts as a wardrobe change. Your clothes also serve as armor, protection against the elements, against injury, and against the social judgment of people who somehow have even less than you do. They're a barrier between you and a world that wants to scrape, cut, burn, or bite every inch of exposed skin. And the smell? Everyone smells. It's not just you, it's everyone. Unwashed bodies, unwashed clothes, and the general miasma of human existence without modern hygiene create an atmosphere so thick you could probably cut it with a knife. But after a while, you stop noticing. Just like you stop noticing the taste of the water and the feeling of insects crawling on your skin. You're dressed now, ready to face the day in clothing that's uncomfortable, impractical, and possibly held together by hope and good intentions. But you're covered, protected, and ready to join the ranks of people trying to scratch out a living in one of the most hostile environments ever created by human ambition and natural indifference. Welcome to Wild West fashion, where style is survival, and survival is the only style that matters. Now that you're dressed in your single set of increasingly aromatic clothing, it's time to address one of the most dangerous activities in the Wild West: personal hygiene. This isn't about looking good. It's about not dying from the various diseases that thrive in environments where soap is a luxury and water is a weapon. Let's start with your teeth. Those pearly whites you're so proud of, they're about to become significantly less pearly and considerably fewer in number. Toothbrushes exist in theory, but in practice, most people clean their teeth with a twig, if they clean them at all. Toothpaste is a foreign concept, so you make do with salt, baking soda, or the time-honored tradition of hoping for the best. Dental care in the Wild West consists primarily of pulling teeth when they hurt too much to ignore. This is done by the local barber who doubles as the town dentist, surgeon, and occasionally mortician. There's no anesthesia except for whiskey, and no real understanding of infection or pain management. You sit in a chair, someone holds you down, and they yank the offending tooth out with a pair of pliers. By age 30, most people are missing significant portions of their dental equipment. By 40, you're lucky if you can eat anything harder than soup. This isn't just a cosmetic issue, it's a nutrition problem. When you can't chew food properly, you can't get proper nutrition, which leads to other health problems in a cascade of bodily system failures. Bathing is even more complicated. The nearest river might be contaminated with animal waste, human waste, or just dirt. The nearest clean water source might be a 2-day ride away. Most people settle for washing their face and hands occasionally and calling it good. A full bath is a monthly event, if you're lucky. When you do bathe, it's an event. The whole town knows about it because heating enough water for a bath requires a significant fire and multiple people to carry the water. You bathe in a metal tub that's been used by everyone else in town. The water is shared because heating it is expensive and wasteful. The soap, when available, is harsh enough to strip paint. It's made from animal fat and lye, and smells like a combination of burning hair and regret. It removes dirt, but also several layers of skin, leaving you red, raw, and smelling like a chemical accident. Hair care consists of occasional washing with the same harsh soap and maybe combing with a wooden comb that's shared among family members. Lice are a fact of life. Everyone has them, from the richest ranch owner to the poorest drifter. You just scratch, and hope they don't carry any interesting diseases. Shaving is an adventure. Men shave with straight razors that are sharpened on leather strops and used until they're too dull to cut butter. The mirror is a piece of polished metal that provides a distorted reflection. The soap is the same harsh stuff used for everything else. The whole process is conducted without adequate lighting and often without adequate sobriety. Cuts from shaving are common and often become infected. There's no antiseptic except for whiskey, which is used for everything from cleaning wounds to starting fires. Men often sport scars on their faces from shaving accidents that became infected and had to be cut out by the local barber. Women face additional challenges. Long hair is impossible to keep clean and often becomes a breeding ground for insects. It's hot, uncomfortable, and practically impossible to manage without modern products. Most women keep it braided or pinned up, not for style, but for basic sanitation. Deodorant doesn't exist. Everyone smells, and after a while, you stop noticing the smell of others because you're too busy not noticing your own smell. The combination of unwashed bodies, unwashed clothes, and the general miasma of frontier life creates an olfactory experience that would probably violate several modern laws. Feminine hygiene is a nightmare that we won't go into detail about, except to say that modern women would probably prefer to remain in the present century rather than experience the creative solutions frontier women had to develop. Hand washing is supposed to happen before meals, but soap is expensive, water is often dirty, and the connection between hygiene and disease isn't fully understood yet. Most people just wipe their hands on their clothes and hope for the best. The result of all this is a population that's constantly fighting infections, diseases, and infestations that modern medicine eliminated decades ago. A small cut can become a life-threatening infection. A minor illness can become fatal because your body is already weakened by poor nutrition and constant exposure to pathogens. Personal hygiene in the Wild West isn't about vanity or social acceptance, it's about basic survival. And most people are losing that battle. One infected tooth, one contaminated water source, and one unwashed hand at a time. But hey, at least you smell like everyone else. Now, let's see if you can survive actually leaving your room. Now that you're dressed and have achieved the minimum level of personal hygiene required to exist in polite society, it's time to step outside and face the day. But here's the thing. Stepping outside in the Wild West isn't like opening your front door and checking the weather. It's like entering a combat zone where the environment itself is actively trying to kill you. The moment you step out of the boarding house, the heat hits you like a physical blow. It's not just warm, it's the kind of heat that makes you question whether you've accidentally walked into a furnace. The sun isn't a gentle light source, it's a cosmic blowtorch focused specifically on making your life miserable. The dust is everywhere, in your eyes, in your nose, in your mouth, between your teeth, under your fingernails. It's not just dirt. It's pulverized earth mixed with animal dung, decomposed plant matter, and whatever died in the street last week. The wind doesn't bring relief, it brings more dust, along with the occasional tumbleweed that seems to have a personal vendetta against your ankles. The street isn't paved because paving is for civilized places. The main road is a mixture of dirt, mud when it rains, dust when it doesn't, and horse manure regardless of weather conditions. Walking requires careful navigation to avoid the deeper puddles of questionable liquid and the fresher deposits of biological waste. The buildings look like they were constructed by people who had heard of architecture but never actually seen it. They're made of wood that's already warping in the heat, with roofs that leak when it rains and walls that provide about as much insulation as a piece of paper. The paint, when there is paint, is already peeling and fading in the relentless sun. The smell outside is even worse than inside. It's a combination of dust, horse manure, human waste, rotting garbage, and whatever that dead thing is over by the livery stable. The heat intensifies every odor until the air itself becomes thick enough to chew. People walk by, but they don't make eye contact. Everyone's too busy dealing with their own survival to worry about social niceties. The men look like they haven't slept in days, and probably haven't. The women look tired beyond their years, which they probably are. Everyone looks like they're one setback away from complete disaster. Animals wander freely through the streets. Horses, mules, pigs, chickens, and dogs, all competing for the same limited resources and leaving evidence of their presence wherever they go. There's no animal control, no leash laws, and no cleanup ordinances. What the animals do, they do, and everyone else just navigates around it. The noise is constant. Horses neighing, dogs barking, pigs squealing, hammering, sawing, shouting, cursing, and the occasional gunshot that may or may not be cause for concern. The silence you're used to doesn't exist here because silence means death, and everyone's too busy staying alive to be quiet. The sun's position tells you it's still morning, but it already feels like the surface of Mercury. The temperature will only get worse as the day progresses, and there's no air conditioning, no cold drinks, and no relief except for whatever shade you can find under building overhangs. You notice that everyone carries weapons, not as fashion statements, but as practical tools for staying alive. Men have guns, knives, and whatever else they could afford or steal. Women carry derringers, hatpins, and kitchen knives hidden in the folds of their dresses. Children carry slingshots and rocks because even kids need to be able to defend themselves. The law enforcement consists of one sheriff who may or may not be sober and may or may not actually be on the side of law and order. He's vastly outnumbered by people who see violence as the most efficient way to solve problems, and he knows it. His authority extends as far as his bullets and his willingness to use them. You realize that everything you thought you knew about the Wild West was wrong. There are no noble cowboys, no dramatic showdowns at high noon, no heroic sheriffs cleaning up the town. There are just people trying to survive in an environment that's hostile to human life, and a society that's barely holding together through a combination of necessity, fear, and the occasional application of violence. The romance of the frontier disappears in about 30 seconds when you realize that frontier life is less about adventure and more about not dying from exposure, disease, violence, or just plain bad luck. Welcome to the Wild West, where every day is a struggle, and most people lose. So you've stepped outside and immediately regretted it, but hiding indoors isn't an option because in the Wild West, if you're not working, you're not eating. And if you're not eating, you're dying. It's a simple equation with no room for vacation days, sick leave, or personal time. Your job, assuming you can find one, depends entirely on what skills you have and how desperate the local employers are. If you're lucky, you might find work as a ranch hand, which sounds romantic until you realize it involves 18-hour days in weather that ranges from unbearably hot to dangerously cold, doing tasks that would be considered cruel and unusual punishment in modern times. Ranch work starts before dawn, when the temperature is merely oppressive instead of life-threatening. You wake up to the sound of a bell or gunshot, depending on how your boss motivates his employees. You roll out of your bedroll because beds are for the bunkhouse, and the bunkhouse is for people who've been there longer than you. Your first task is feeding the animals, which involves carrying heavy buckets of water and bales of hay that weigh more than you do. The horses are large, temperamental, and perfectly capable of killing you either on purpose or by accident. They bite, kick, and generally express their displeasure with frontier life by taking it out on whoever's closest. Cattle are even worse. They're not the docile creatures you see in movies. They're half-wild animals with horns, sharp hooves, and attitudes that suggest they view humans as inconvenient obstacles to their personal freedom. A bull can charge without warning. A cow can kick with the force of a cannon, and a steer can simply step on your foot and permanently rearrange your skeletal structure. If you're working cattle drives, you get the additional pleasure of spending weeks in the saddle, moving hundreds of angry animals across terrain designed to kill both you and them. You eat dust, sleep on rocks, and pray that the cattle don't decide to stampede in the middle of the night. The pay is terrible, when you get paid at all. Many ranchers operate on the principle that room and board should be enough compensation for the privilege of working yourself to death on their behalf. When you do get paid, it's often in credit at the company store, where prices are inflated to ensure you never actually make money. If ranch work isn't available, you might find employment in the mines, which is like volunteering to be buried alive for the slim possibility of finding something valuable enough to justify the experience. Mining in the Wild West involves crawling into holes in the ground that could collapse at any moment, breathing air that's thick with dust and toxic vapors, and using tools that are more likely to injure you than extract anything useful. Mine work is paid by what you find, not by how hard you work, which means you could spend months digging and come out with nothing but lung disease and a profound appreciation for sunlight. Most miners die poor, and most mines produce nothing but broken dreams and broken bodies. If you're a woman, your employment options are even more limited. You can work as a seamstress if you can sew, a cook if you can avoid poisoning people, a laundress if you don't mind destroying your hands with harsh soap and scalding water, or in the saloons where the work is dangerous. The hours are long, and the customers are drunk, armed, and not particularly interested in treating you with respect. Teaching is an option if you can read and write and don't mind trying to educate children who would rather be outside doing anything else, for parents who may or may not think education is worth the expense. The schoolhouse is usually a one-room building with no heating, no cooling, and materials that are older than some of the students. Storekeeping sounds civilized until you realize that most stores are targets for robbery. The merchandise is whatever could be shipped across hostile territory without spoiling. And the customers are people who may decide that paying for things is optional. If you can't find regular work, you can always try prospecting, which involves wandering around the desert with a pickaxe and a dream, hoping to find gold or silver while slowly dying of exposure, dehydration, and optimism. Most prospectors find nothing but regret and an intimate knowledge of how much the human body can suffer before giving up entirely. The workday lasts from sunrise to sunset, or longer if the work demands it. There are no breaks except for meals, no weekends, no holidays, and no sick days. If you're injured, you work through it. If you're sick, you work through it. If you're dying, you work until you can't, and then someone takes your job. Safety regulations don't exist because safety costs money, and money is the only thing scarcer than water. Workers are expendable, employers know it, and everyone adjusts their expectations accordingly. You're not an employee, you're a temporary solution to a labor problem. But here's the cruel irony. Even if you work yourself to death, you probably won't make enough money to improve your situation. You'll earn just enough to buy food and shelter and maybe replace your clothes when they finally disintegrate. The dream of striking it rich is what keeps people working, but the reality is that most people die poor, tired, and far from home. Welcome to the Wild West economy, where labor is cheap, life is cheaper, and the only guaranteed return on your investment is exhaustion. You've been working in the blazing sun for about 6 hours now, and your body is starting to send you some urgent messages. Your stomach is cramping, your head is pounding, and you're beginning to understand why frontier medicine was less about curing disease and more about managing the process of dying. Lunchtime in the Wild West isn't a relaxing break from work. It's a brief intermission in your ongoing battle for survival. You don't go to a restaurant because restaurants, as you know them, don't exist. You either pack something that won't spoil in the heat, or you eat whatever the chuckwagon cook has managed to produce from ingredients that were questionable when they were fresh. If you're working on a ranch or cattle drive, lunch consists of hardtack, beans, and coffee. The hardtack is so hard, It could be used as building material and has about as much flavor. The beans have been cooked in the same pot for so long, they've achieved a consistency somewhere between gruel and cement. The coffee is strong enough to dissolve spoons and tastes like it was filtered through a saddle. If you're working in town, you might be able to buy lunch from a street vendor who's selling food of unknown origin from a cart of dubious cleanliness. The meat might be beef, might be horse, might be something that died of natural causes last week. The bread is usually stale, the vegetables are wilted, and everything tastes like dust. Water is the biggest challenge because clean water is rarer than gold and more valuable than silver. The water available during work is usually whatever can be found locally, which means it's brown, tastes like minerals, and probably contains enough bacteria to start its own civilization. You drink it anyway because dehydration will kill you faster than whatever's living in the water. If you're lucky enough to have money, you might be able to buy a bottle of beer or whiskey, which is safer than water because the alcohol kills most of the harmful organisms. Of course, drinking alcohol in the middle of a workday while operating dangerous equipment in extreme heat creates its own set of problems. But that's tomorrow's problem. The eating conditions are primitive. You sit on whatever's available, a rock, a log, the ground if you're desperate. You eat with whatever utensils you have, which might be a knife you carved yourself, or just your hands. The flies are attracted to your food, and they're not picky about sharing. You learn to eat quickly and swallow without looking too closely at what you're consuming. Everyone eats together, not because it's social, but because there's safety in numbers. Wild animals, both the four-legged and two-legged varieties, are less likely to attack a group than an individual. You eat with one hand and keep the other near your weapon because lunch breaks have been known to turn violent over food disputes, territory disagreements, or just general irritability. The conversation during lunch consists mainly of complaints about the heat, the work, the food, the water, and the general unfairness of existence. People don't discuss philosophy or politics. They discuss practical matters like whether the water upstream is safe, whether anyone's seen signs of hostile activity, and whether that noise last night was an animal or something that required armed response. Digestive issues are a constant problem because the food is bad, the water is worse, and the stress of frontier life wreaks havoc on your digestive system. Everyone has stomach problems, diarrhea, constipation, or some combination of both. There's no privacy for dealing with these issues and no effective treatment except time and hope. The heat during lunch is at its worst because it's midday and there's usually no shade. You eat quickly, not just because the food is bad, but because sitting in the direct sunlight for too long can cause heat stroke, which in the Wild West is often fatal. The metal utensils and cups become too hot to touch, and the food starts cooking again while you're trying to eat it. After lunch, there's no rest period, no time to digest, no gentle transition back to work. You finish eating, wipe your hands on your clothes, and immediately return to whatever backbreaking labor you were doing before, because time is money, and money is survival, and survival is all that matters. Your stomach is now full of questionable substances. Your digestive system is in open revolt, and you still have 6 more hours of work ahead of you in heat that would be considered inhumane in modern times. But you keep working because the alternative is starvation. Welcome to frontier dining, where every meal is an adventure, and not all adventures have happy endings. Now, let's see if you can work through the afternoon without collapsing. The afternoon sun in the Wild West isn't just hot, it's malicious. It's the kind of heat that makes you question your life choices, your sanity, and your will to live. The temperature climbs past anything reasonable and settles into the realm of cruel and unusual punishment. By 2 o'clock, the air is shimmering with heat waves that make the horizon dance like a mirage. You're sweating through clothes that are already soaked, and the sweat isn't cooling you anymore, it's just making you wet and miserable. The heat radiates off every surface, the ground, The buildings, the rocks, everything becomes a source of thermal torture. Your water supply, which was questionable to begin with, is now hot enough to brew tea. The metal containers heat up until they're too hot to touch, and the water inside tastes like it was boiled in a dirty sock. You drink it anyway, because hot water is better than no water, and dehydration in this heat is a death sentence. The work doesn't stop for weather, because weather is just another obstacle to overcome. You keep swinging that pickaxe, keep moving those cattle, keep building that fence, even though your vision is starting to blur and your hands are shaking from heat exhaustion. The boss doesn't care about your comfort level, he cares about productivity, and productivity requires working through conditions that would shut down modern construction sites. Heatstroke is a real and present danger, but there's no air-conditioned break room to recover in, no medical supervision to monitor your condition. The treatment for heat exhaustion is to pour some water on your head, sit in whatever shade you can find for 5 minutes, and get back to work. Anyone who can't handle the heat is considered weak, and weakness is a luxury frontier society can't afford. The animals suffer too. Horses foam at the mouth and stumble from exhaustion. Cattle cluster in whatever shade they can find and refuse to move. Dogs pant constantly and seek out any available water source, even if it's contaminated. The smart animals find shelter and wait for cooler temperatures. The humans just keep working. Your clothes become instruments of torture. The thick fabric that was supposed to protect you from the sun now traps heat against your body. Your hat, which was meant to provide shade, becomes a solar collector that bakes your brain. The boots that were designed to protect your feet now feel like ovens that are slowly cooking your toes. Sunburn is inevitable and severe. The sun at this altitude and latitude is strong enough to cause third-degree burns on exposed skin. Your face, hands, and neck quickly turn red, then start to peel, then blister. The pain is constant, and there's no sunscreen, no aloe vera, no relief, except for whatever shade you can find. The heat affects everything. Tools become too hot to handle without gloves, and there are no gloves. Metal surfaces are hot enough to cause burns. Wood warps and splits. Leather dries out and cracks. Water evaporates so quickly that you're constantly thirsty, no matter how much you drink. Working in this heat requires a different kind of strategy. You move slower to conserve energy. You seek shade whenever possible. You pour water on yourself when you can spare it. You watch for signs of heat exhaustion in yourself and others, because recognizing the symptoms early is the difference between discomfort and death. The heat also brings out the insects. Flies swarm around anything organic. Wasps become aggressive and attack without provocation. Scorpions seek shade in the same places humans want to rest. Rattlesnakes become more active and more dangerous because they're also trying to escape the heat. Mental capacity diminishes in extreme heat. Your ability to think clearly, make decisions, and solve problems deteriorates as your brain literally overheats. Simple tasks become complicated. Complicated tasks become impossible. You make mistakes that could be fatal, and you don't realize you're making them until it's too late. The dust kicked up by wind and movement becomes a choking cloud that coats everything and everyone. You breathe it, taste it, feel it, grinding between your teeth and settling in your lungs. The combination of heat, dust, and exertion creates a perfect storm of respiratory distress. By late afternoon, you're moving like a zombie, going through the motions of work while your body systems shut down one by one. Your muscles cramp from dehydration. Your head pounds from heat exhaustion. Your stomach rebels against the combination of bad food and extreme temperature. And yet, you keep working because stopping means losing your job, losing your income, and losing your chance at survival in a world where there are no safety nets, no social services, and no sympathy for people who can't handle the heat. The afternoon shift lasts until sundown, which feels like it will never come. The sun hangs in the sky like a malevolent eye, watching your slow deterioration with apparent satisfaction. Every minute stretches into an hour, every hour into an eternity. Welcome to a Wild West afternoon, where the weather is your enemy, the work never stops, and survival depends on your ability to function in conditions that would be considered torture in civilized society. Just when you think the heat can't get any worse, the wind starts to blow. But this isn't a cooling breeze. This is nature's way of reminding you that the Wild West has an unlimited capacity for making your life miserable. The wind brings dust, sand, grit, and the occasional tumbleweed that seems personally offended by your existence. Dust storms in the Wild West aren't just inconveniences, they're natural disasters that can kill you in multiple creative ways. The wind picks up dirt from hundreds of miles away and hurls it at you with the force of a sandblaster. You can't see, you can't breathe, and you can't escape because the storm can last for hours. The dust gets into everything: your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your lungs, your food, your water, your clothes. Your eyes water constantly, but the tears just turn to mud on your face. You cough, but that just brings up more dust. You try to cover your face, but the wind rips away whatever protection you've improvised. Lightning is another pleasant surprise that frontier weather likes to spring on unsuspecting humans. Thunderstorms develop quickly and violently in the open plains, and when you're caught in the open with no shelter, you become a human lightning rod. Lightning strikes are often fatal, and even near misses can leave you temporarily deaf, blind, or unconscious. When it does rain, it doesn't sprinkle gently. It dumps water from the sky like someone overturned a lake. The ground, which has been baked hard by months of sun, can't absorb the water fast enough, so it runs off in flash floods that can sweep away people, animals, buildings, and anything else that isn't nailed down. The temperature swings are extreme. During the day, it's hot enough to fry eggs on rocks. At night, it can drop 40 degrees or more, leaving you shivering in clothes that are still damp with sweat. You go from heat exhaustion to hypothermia in a matter of hours. Hail is common and destructive. Hailstones the size of golf balls fall from the sky with enough force to kill livestock, dent metal, and give you a concussion if you're caught in the open. There's no warning, no weather service to alert you, just sudden pain from the sky. Tornadoes develop without warning and can destroy entire towns in minutes. The flat prairie landscape provides no natural windbreaks, so when a twister forms, it has a clear path to devastate whatever's in its way. There are no storm cellars, no early warning systems, just the hope that you'll see it coming in time to run. The wind itself, even without storms, is a constant enemy. It dries out your skin, cracks your lips, and makes every cut and scrape feel like it's been rubbed with salt. It blows away anything that isn't secured and turns simple tasks like lighting a fire or setting up shelter into major engineering challenges. Seasonal weather changes bring their own special tortures. Summer heat that could kill you gives way to winter cold that definitely will. Snow falls without mercy, and temperatures drop so low that exposed skin freezes in minutes. There's no central heating, no warm clothing adequate for the conditions, and no way to escape the cold except by burning whatever fuel you can find. Spring brings flooding as snow melts and overwhelms rivers that were dry channels just weeks before. Entire communities can be washed away overnight, and there's no flood insurance, no disaster relief, and no help coming from anyone. Fall weather is unpredictable, with sudden temperature drops that can catch you unprepared. One day you're sweating in shirt sleeves, the next day you're freezing in a blizzard. The weather doesn't follow schedules or predictions, it just happens, and you deal with the consequences. Weather forecasting consists of looking at the sky and guessing wrong. Most of the time, people are caught completely off guard by weather changes that can be fatal. There's no Doppler radar, no satellite imagery, no weather service, just folk wisdom that's wrong half the time. Clothing isn't adequate for the weather extremes. Your one set of clothes has to work in temperatures ranging from over 100 degrees to well below freezing. There's no specialized gear, no modern materials, just cotton, wool, and leather that provide minimal protection against nature's assault. Shelter is minimal and often inadequate. Buildings are drafty, poorly insulated, and designed more for speed of construction than weather resistance. When a serious storm hits, the buildings themselves become weapons as roofs blow off, walls collapse, and debris flies through the air. The psychological impact of constantly battling weather is enormous. When every day brings the possibility of being killed by forces beyond your control, you develop a fatalistic attitude that affects everything you do. You live in constant tension, never knowing if today's weather will be merely miserable or actually fatal. Weather affects everything you do: how you work, where you sleep, what you eat, how you travel. Every decision has to factor in the possibility that nature will suddenly decide to try to kill you in some new and creative way. Welcome to Wild West weather, where Mother Nature is an abusive parent and you're the unwanted child she's trying to get rid of. The forecast is always the same: hostile, with a chance of death. The sun is finally setting, which should bring relief, but this is the Wild West, where relief is a foreign concept. Instead of cooling down, the evening brings a whole new set of challenges that make you long for the simple misery of working in blazing heat. As darkness falls, the temperature doesn't drop gradually. It plummets like someone turned off a cosmic heater. You go from sweating to shivering in what feels like minutes. Your sweat-soaked clothes that were torture during the day now become frozen torture at night. The same outfit that was too hot now provides about as much warmth as tissue paper. Supper isn't a meal, it's an endurance test. The food is the same slop you had for lunch, but now it's cold, congealed, and somehow even less appetizing than it was before. You eat by firelight if you're lucky, or in complete darkness if you're not. The coffee, which was terrible hot, is now terrible and cold. But the cold coffee is still the safest liquid available because the alternatives are water that's probably contaminated or alcohol that will impair your judgment at a time when impaired judgment can get you killed. You drink it anyway because liquid is liquid, and dehydration is still a threat even when you're not dying of heat. The dining experience is enhanced by darkness that makes it impossible to see what you're eating, which is probably for the best. You chew carefully because you can't tell the difference between tough meat and leather, and swallow quickly because lingering over the flavor is an exercise in masochism. Wild animals become active at night, and they're hungry, just like you. Wolves, coyotes, mountain lions, and bears all view frontier settlements as convenient buffets. The livestock are obvious targets, but humans who wander too far from the fire or make too much noise can also find themselves on the menu. Insects come out in force as the temperature drops. Mosquitoes emerge in clouds that can drain your blood and leave you covered in welts that itch for days. Flies continue their assault on anything organic. Spiders emerge from hiding places to hunt, and some of them are large enough to hunt you. Snakes are active at night, especially rattlesnakes who like to seek out warm places to rest. Places like your bedroll, your boots, or anywhere else a human might be sleeping. The smart frontiersman shakes out everything before using it, and sleeps lightly because being bitten by a rattlesnake in the middle of nowhere with no medical care available is usually a death sentence. The darkness is absolute because there are no streetlights, no electric signs, no modern illumination of any kind. The moon and stars provide some light when they're visible, but clouds or storms can leave you in total blackness. If you don't have a fire, you can't see your hand in front of your face. Fires are essential but dangerous. They provide light, warmth, and protection from some animals, but they also attract unwanted attention from both the animal and human varieties. A fire announces your location to anyone within miles, and in the Wild West, not everyone who finds you will have good intentions. Fuel for fires is scarce and precious. Wood is rare in many areas, so you burn whatever you can find. Dried buffalo chips, sagebrush, anything that will combust. The fire produces more smoke than heat, and the smoke burns your eyes and throat, but you stay close because the alternative is freezing. Sleep is a luxury you can't afford. Even when you're exhausted beyond endurance, you can't really sleep because sleeping soundly can get you killed. You doze fitfully, with one ear listening for sounds that might indicate danger. You wake up frequently to check the fire, check your surroundings, and wonder what that noise was. Your bedroll, if you have one, is a thin blanket on hard ground. The rocks poke into your spine, the cold seeps through the inadequate padding, and every position is uncomfortable. You share your bedroll with insects, small animals, and whatever diseases they might be carrying. Guard duty is necessary because someone has to stay awake to watch for threats. Animals, human predators, fires getting out of control, weather changes, and general signs that something is about to go wrong. Everyone takes turns staying awake, but the person on guard duty is fighting exhaustion and boredom, which makes them less effective at the job. The psychological impact of nighttime in the Wild West is severe. When you can't see beyond the circle of firelight, every sound could be a threat. Every shadow could be hiding something dangerous. Your imagination fills the darkness with dangers both real and imagined. And in the Wild West, most of the imagined dangers turn out to be real. You finally fall into an uneasy sleep sometime after midnight. But you know that dawn will come early, and with it another day of the same heat, dust, work, and danger that you somehow survived today. The night isn't rest, it's just a different kind of survival. Welcome to a Wild West evening, where darkness brings cold, discomfort, and the constant awareness that you're surrounded by things that want to eat you, burn you, freeze you, or shoot you. Pleasant dreams. Dawn comes too early, which is saying something because it comes early everywhere. Dawn in the Wild West arrives like a creditor demanding payment for yesterday's survival. You wake up cold, stiff, sore, and already exhausted from a night of not really sleeping. The first order of business is checking to make sure you're still alive and all your limbs are still attached. A night on the frontier can leave you with frostbite, insect bites, small animal bites, mysterious rashes, and joints that have apparently decided to stop working entirely. Getting up requires a careful assessment of what hurts and why. Your back aches from sleeping on rocks. Your legs are cramped from the cold. Your arms are sore from yesterday's work, and your head pounds from dehydration, bad air, and the general stress of existing in a hostile environment. You check your boots for scorpions, spiders, snakes, and other creatures that might have decided your footwear looked like a nice place to spend the night. This is not paranoia, this is practical survival, because putting your foot into a boot occupied by something venomous is a mistake you only make once. Personal hygiene in the morning consists of splashing some water on your face if you have water, and wiping your hands on your clothes. The same brown water that was questionable yesterday is even more questionable today after sitting overnight in a container that wasn't clean to begin with. Breakfast is the same hardtack and coffee that you've been eating for weeks. The hardtack has somehow gotten harder overnight, and the coffee tastes like it was brewed in a boot, but it's liquid and it's warm, and those are the only requirements that matter. You eat quickly, not because you're eager to start the day, but because the sooner you finish eating, the sooner you can start working, and the sooner you start working, the sooner the day will be over. This is frontier logic, where the goal isn't to enjoy life, but to survive it. The temperature at dawn is actually pleasant, which would be encouraging if you didn't know that in 3 hours it will be hot enough to kill you. The brief period of comfortable weather serves mainly to remind you that nature is capable of being pleasant but chooses not to be. You check your equipment, weapons, tools, clothing, and supplies to make sure nothing was stolen, damaged, or eaten during the night. Equipment failures in the Wild West aren't inconveniences, they're potential death sentences. A broken tool means you can't work. A damaged weapon means you can't defend yourself. A torn piece of clothing means increased exposure to the elements. Water inventory is critical because you need to know how much you have, how much you'll need, and how much you can afford to use for non-drinking purposes. The mathematics of water consumption in the Wild West are brutal and unforgiving. One miscalculation can mean death from dehydration. You load up whatever possessions you have, which isn't much. Everything you own has to be carried, so you own very little. What you do have is practical rather than decorative. Weapons, tools, basic clothing, and maybe one small personal item that reminds you of better times. The workday starts immediately because daylight is precious, and work needs to be done while you can see what you're doing and before the heat becomes unbearable. There's no gradual transition into productivity, no morning coffee break, no gentle easing into the day's activities. Your fellow workers, if you have any, look as rough as you feel. Everyone is dirty, tired, sore, and operating on minimal sleep, but everyone gets up and gets moving because the alternative to working is starving, and the alternative to starving is death. The animals that survived the night need attention. Horses need water, and whatever food is available. Cattle need to be counted to make sure none wandered off or were taken by predators or thieves. Livestock losses are economic disasters that can destroy a ranch or a family. You take stock of the day ahead, and it looks exactly like yesterday. More heat, more dust, more back-breaking labor, more danger, and more discomfort. The routine never changes because the challenges never change. You get up, you work, you try not to die, and you hope you'll be able to do it again tomorrow. The sun rises with what seems like malicious intent, already warming the air and promising another day of temperatures that would be considered inhumane anywhere else. But this is the Wild West, where humane conditions are a luxury you can't afford. You're about to start another day in paradise. Welcome to the frontier, where every morning brings the opportunity to discover new ways to suffer and new reasons to question your life choices. Now that you've achieved consciousness and discovered that you're still among the living, it's time to deal with one of the most critical aspects of Wild West survival: water. Specifically, the challenge of finding water that won't kill you, which is considerably more difficult than it sounds. Water in the Wild West comes in several varieties, all of them problematic. There's muddy water, which is brown and contains enough sediment to build a small dam. There's stagnant water, which smells like death and probably contains enough bacteria to start its own civilization. And there's clear water, which looks safe but is usually contaminated with minerals, chemicals, or biological agents that will make you wish you had stuck with the muddy water. Rivers and streams seem like obvious water sources until you realize that everything upstream has been using them as sewers. Animals drink from them, urinate in them, defecate in them, and die in them. Mining operations dump chemicals into them, settlements dump garbage into them, and whatever flows past your camp has been filtered through miles of contamination. Wells, when they exist, are community property, which means they're maintained by people who don't necessarily understand the principles of water sanitation. The well water is drawn up in buckets that are shared by everyone in town, including people with communicable diseases, animals, and whatever else needs water. Springs sound ideal until you discover that many of them are mineral springs that contain enough sulfur, arsenic, or other natural toxins to poison you slowly. The water might taste metallic, bitter, or like rotten eggs, but you drink it anyway because it's wet, and wet is better than dead from dehydration. Rainwater collection sounds like a good idea, until you realize that rain barrels become breeding grounds for mosquitoes, algae, and various microorganisms. The barrels themselves are often contaminated with whatever they were used for before being converted to water storage, and cleaning them isn't always possible. Water purification technology consists of letting the sediment settle, straining it through cloth, and hoping for the best. Boiling water helps, but requires fuel that might not be available and time that you might not have. Most people just drink whatever water they can find and deal with the consequences. The consequences are severe. Dysentery, cholera, typhoid, and various other waterborne diseases are common and often fatal. When contaminated water gives you diarrhea in the Wild West, you don't just get sick, you get dangerously dehydrated, which can kill you faster than the original contamination. Water quality testing consists of looking at it, smelling it, and tasting it. If it doesn't look too brown, smell too bad, or taste too terrible, you drink it. This is not a scientific method, but it's the only method available, and the standards are adjusted based on how thirsty you are. Carrying water presents its own challenges. Water is heavy, approximately 8 pounds per gallon, and you can only carry so much. You need containers to carry it in, and containers are breakable, losable, and stealable. You need to keep the water cool, but you're traveling through areas where the ambient temperature can be over 100 degrees. Water conservation becomes an obsession. You measure every drop, calculate every need, and ration every sip. You wash with as little water as possible, cook with the minimum amount required, and save every drop you can for drinking. Water becomes more valuable than gold because gold can't keep you alive in the desert. Finding water requires knowledge of the terrain, weather patterns, and animal behavior. You look for green vegetation, tracks of animals, and low-lying areas where water might collect. But these same water sources attract predators, both animal and human, so finding water often means finding trouble. Water rights are serious business in the Wild West. People fight and die over access to water sources. Rivers, wells, and springs are claimed, staked, and defended like gold claims because in many ways they're more valuable than gold. Without water, there is no life, and without life, there is no point in owning anything else. Sharing water is a complex social issue. When water is scarce, people become very protective of their supplies, but refusing to share water with someone who's dying of thirst is considered murder, even in the lawless frontier. So you share when you have to, but you calculate carefully how much you can afford to give away. The daily water requirement for survival is approximately 1 gallon per person per day in moderate conditions. In the extreme heat of the Wild West, you need more, but finding more isn't always possible. You learn to function on less water than your body actually needs, and hope that you can find more before the dehydration becomes fatal. Water becomes a constant preoccupation, coloring every decision you make. Where you travel, how long you stay in one place, what work you accept, and who you associate with all depend on access to water sources. You plan your life around water the way modern people plan around money. Welcome to Wild West Hydration, where clean water is a myth, safe water is a luxury, and any water is a blessing that you never take for granted. The thirst is real, and it never really goes away. Working in the Wild West isn't just about the physical labor, although that's brutal enough. It's about operating in an environment where death can come from dozens of different directions at any moment, and most of those directions involve things that want to bite, sting, poison, or otherwise ruin your day. Let's start with the insects, because they're everywhere, and they're all personally offended by your existence. Mosquitoes swarm in clouds that can literally drain enough blood to weaken you. They carry diseases like malaria, yellow fever, and other ailments that don't have names but will kill you just as efficiently. The only protection is smoke, which burns your eyes and lungs, or covering every inch of skin, which causes heat stroke. Flies are attracted to anything organic, including you. They land on your food, your water, your open wounds, and your face. They carry diseases from every disgusting thing they've landed on previously, and they're impossible to keep away. There are no screens, no repellent, and no escape. Wasps and hornets build nests in trees, bushes, and anywhere else they can find. They're aggressive, territorial, and equipped with stingers that can cause allergic reactions severe enough to be fatal. There's no antihistamine, no epinephrine, and no emergency medical care if you have a bad reaction. Spiders range from merely painful to deadly venomous. Black widows, brown recluses, and various other species can kill you or cause necrosis that leads to amputation or death. They hide in dark places like your boots, your bedroll, and anywhere else you might put your hands or feet without looking. Scorpions are active at night, and their stings are excruciatingly painful and potentially fatal. They're attracted to warm places, which includes your body heat, so they crawl into bedding, clothes, and boots. The pain from a scorpion sting can last for hours, and there's no pain relief available. Ants might seem harmless until you encounter fire ants, whose stings cause intense burning pain and can trigger allergic reactions, or carpenter ants that can literally eat the wooden structures you depend on for shelter. Some species of ants in the Southwest can strip flesh from bone, given enough time and opportunity. Ticks carry diseases like Rocky Mountain spotted fever and other ailments that can kill you slowly and painfully. They attach to your skin and feed on your blood, often without you noticing until they're engorged and difficult to remove. Removing them improperly can leave parts of the tick embedded in your skin, causing infection. Chiggers are microscopic and cause intense itching that can last for weeks. They burrow into your skin and cause red welts that itch so badly you'll scratch until you bleed. The scratching leads to secondary infections because your fingernails are dirty and there's no antiseptic available. Centipedes and millipedes aren't usually deadly, but their bites are painful and can become infected. They're attracted to dark, damp places, which are also the places humans seek shelter, so encounters are inevitable. Some species can grow to several inches long and are aggressive when threatened. Bees and other flying insects become more aggressive in hot weather and when their water sources are scarce. They'll attack in swarms, and multiple stings can cause severe reactions even in people who aren't normally allergic. The pain is intense, and there's no ice, no antihistamine, and no relief. Beetles might seem harmless, but some species bite, some are poisonous, and some carry diseases. They get into food supplies, clothing, and equipment, where they cause damage and contamination. Some beetles are large enough to cause painful bites that can become infected. Locusts and grasshoppers destroy crops, which means they destroy food supplies. They swarm in numbers that can darken the sky, and they eat everything green in their path. When they're done with the crops, they start on clothing, leather goods, and anything else organic they can find. Moths are attracted to light, and they get into clothing, food, and other organic materials where they lay eggs and cause damage. Their larvae eat wool, cotton, and other natural fibers, leaving holes in the limited clothing you can afford to own. The combination of all these insects creates a constant state of irritation, pain, and disease transmission. You're always swatting, scratching, applying whatever remedies you can improvise, and dealing with bites, stings, and infections. The insects never sleep, never rest, and never give you a moment's peace. Protection from insects is minimal and often ineffective. Smoke helps, but causes respiratory problems. Heavy clothing provides some protection, but causes heat stroke. Staying indoors helps, but most buildings aren't insect-proof, and you have to work outside anyway. The psychological impact of constant insect harassment is severe. When you're always in pain, always itching, always swatting, and always worried about disease transmission, you can't focus on anything else. The insects become an obsession that affects every aspect of your life. Welcome to Wild West entomology, where every bug wants to bite you, sting you, poison you, or eat you alive. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about it except suffer and hope you survive long enough to develop some immunity. The insects are bad enough, but they're just the opening act for the Wild West's main attraction, the large animals that view humans as either threats to be eliminated or snacks to be consumed. Let's meet some of your new neighbors, starting with the ones that are only moderately interested in killing you. Rattlesnakes are probably the most famous of the Wild West's deadly residents, and their reputation is well deserved. They're aggressive when threatened, their bite is often fatal, and they have the courtesy to warn you before they strike. Unfortunately, that warning consists of a rattling sound that's often mistaken for insects, wind, or your own imagination until it's too late. The venom from a rattlesnake bite causes excruciating pain, massive swelling, tissue death, and often death itself. The bite location swells to several times its normal size, turns black, and begins to rot. There's no antivenom, no pain medication, and no medical treatment except amputation if you're lucky enough to reach someone willing and able to perform it. Coral snakes are less aggressive but more venomous. Their bite is often painless initially, which means you might not realize you've been bitten until the paralysis begins. The venom affects the nervous system, causing respiratory failure and death. There's no treatment, no cure, and no hope if you're bitten far from civilization. Copperheads and water moccasins are semi-aquatic, which means they can attack you while you're trying to get water or cross streams. Their bites are painful and dangerous, even if not immediately fatal. The swelling and infection that follow can disable you for weeks or months, assuming you survive. Mountain lions, also known as cougars or pumas, are apex predators that can kill a human with a single swipe of their claws. They're solitary hunters that prefer to attack from behind or above. They can leap incredible distances, run faster than horses, and climb better than most humans. They're also virtually silent when they hunt. A mountain lion attack usually begins with the cat leaping onto your back and attempting to bite through your neck or skull. Their claws are designed to hold struggling prey, while their powerful jaws crush bones. The attack is sudden, violent, and usually fatal. There's no warning, no time to prepare, and very little chance of survival without weapons and the skill to use them. Bears come in several varieties, all of them capable of killing you in creative ways. Black bears are smaller but more aggressive and more likely to view humans as food. Grizzly bears are larger, stronger, and more territorial. They can run faster than horses, climb trees, and have claws that can disembowel you with a single swipe. Bear attacks are unpredictable. A mother bear with cubs will attack anything she perceives as a threat. A hungry bear will attack potential food sources. A surprised bear will attack because it's surprised. Playing dead sometimes works, sometimes it just makes you easier to eat. Wolves travel in packs, hunt cooperatively, and view humans as potential prey, especially when other food sources are scarce. A wolf pack can take down animals much larger than humans, and they're intelligent enough to use tactics, strategy, and teamwork. A single wolf is dangerous, a pack is lethal. Wolf attacks usually involve the pack surrounding their prey and attacking from multiple directions simultaneously. They go for the legs first to disable their victim, then attack the throat. The attack is coordinated, efficient, and usually fatal unless you have superior weapons and the high ground. Coyotes are smaller than wolves but more numerous and more adaptable. They're scavengers as well as hunters, and they're not above attacking humans, especially children or injured adults. They carry diseases like rabies that make them even more dangerous, because a rabid coyote will attack anything without fear or caution. Wild boars are aggressive, territorial, and equipped with tusks that can disembowel you. They charge without warning, and they're fast enough to catch most humans. They're also intelligent enough to hold grudges, so if you encounter one and escape, it might remember you and hunt you down later. Buffalo might seem docile because they're herbivores, but they're actually one of the most dangerous animals in the Wild West. They're massive, fast, and unpredictable. A buffalo weighs over a ton, can run 35 miles per hour, and has horns designed to gore predators. They stampede without warning and trample anything in their path. Wild horses might seem less dangerous, but they bite, kick, and can easily kill a human with a single well-placed hoof. They're also smart enough to be vindictive, so if you try to catch or ride one and fail, it might decide to settle the score later. The key to surviving encounters with large predators is avoidance. But in the Wild West, avoidance isn't always possible. You have to work in areas where these animals live. You have to travel through their territory. You have to compete with them for water sources. And sometimes they decide that you look like dinner. Welcome to the Wild West food chain, where humans are not at the top, and every day brings the opportunity to discover exactly where you rank in nature's hierarchy of who gets to eat whom. If the wildlife isn't enough to keep you on your toes, the Wild West also offers a generous selection of human predators who view other people as walking sources of income, entertainment, or target practice. The absence of effective law enforcement means that anyone with a gun and a lack of moral fiber can set up shop as a professional predator. Outlaws come in several varieties, each with their own specialized methods of making your life miserable. Highway robbers position themselves on frequently traveled routes and demand money, goods, or lives from travelers. They usually work in groups, are well armed, and have the advantage of choosing when and where to attack. Bank robbers target the few financial institutions that exist in frontier towns. They're usually well organized, well armed, and willing to kill anyone who interferes with their business. This includes bank employees, customers, and innocent bystanders who happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Train robbers have turned stopping locomotives into an art form. They block tracks, derail cars, and board moving trains to rob passengers and cargo. They're often former soldiers who know how to use military tactics and weapons against civilian targets. Cattle rustlers steal livestock, which, in the Wild West, is essentially stealing someone's life savings and livelihood. They operate in organized gangs, move stolen cattle across vast distances, and kill anyone who tries to stop them. The theft of cattle is considered serious enough to warrant hanging without trial. Horse thieves target the most valuable possession most people own. A man's horse is his transportation, his livelihood, and often his only chance of escape in an emergency. Stealing someone's horse in the desert is essentially murdering them slowly, so horse theft is punishable by immediate execution. Claim jumpers target gold miners, prospectors, and anyone who's found something valuable. They use violence, intimidation, and sometimes outright murder to take over productive mining claims. The isolation of mining areas makes claim jumpers particularly dangerous because there's no help available. Confidence men run elaborate scams to separate people from their money. They pose as legitimate businessmen, government officials, or investment opportunities. They're often educated, charming, and completely ruthless in their willingness to destroy their victims financially. Professional gunfighters hire out their services to anyone willing to pay for violence. They're skilled with weapons, experienced in combat, and willing to kill for money. Some work for ranchers, some for business interests, and some simply for whoever pays the most. Bounty hunters track down wanted criminals for the reward money, but they're not always particular about whether their targets are actually guilty or whether they bring them back alive. The reward is often the same whether the fugitive is captured or killed. So many bounty hunters prefer the simpler option. Vigilante groups form when communities decide to take law enforcement into their own hands. They often start with good intentions, but quickly degenerate into mobs that hang first and ask questions later. Being accused of a crime by a vigilante group is often a death sentence, regardless of guilt or innocence. Corrupt lawmen are perhaps the most dangerous predators because they have the authority of law behind their criminal activities. A corrupt sheriff can rob, kill, and terrorize with impunity because there's no higher authority to appeal to and no way to fight back legally. The absence of reliable law enforcement means that disputes are often settled with violence. Property disagreements, business conflicts, and personal insults all have the potential to escalate into gunfights that leave multiple people dead. Self-defense is essential but complicated. Carrying weapons is necessary but also makes you a target for people who want to steal your weapons. Being skilled with weapons attracts challenges from people who want to test their skills against yours. Not carrying weapons makes you an easy target for people who do. The legal system, when it exists, is often corrupt, incompetent, or simply absent. Judges may be bought, juries may be intimidated, and evidence may be manufactured or ignored. Justice is often determined by who has the most guns, rather than who's actually guilty or innocent. The psychological impact of living in constant fear of human predators is severe. You can't trust strangers, you can't travel safely, you can't accumulate wealth without attracting unwanted attention, and you can't count on anyone to help you if you're attacked. Welcome to Wild West law enforcement, where the only law is what you can enforce yourself, and the only order is what you can maintain with superior firepower. The good guys don't always win, and sometimes there are no good guys. Living in constant fear of insects, animals, and human predators is exhausting, but it's not the most dangerous thing about the Wild West. That distinction belongs to disease, which kills more frontier residents than all the other threats combined. Disease in the Wild West spreads quickly, kills efficiently, and shows no mercy to age, gender, or social status. Cholera is one of the most feared diseases because it kills quickly and horribly. The victim experiences severe diarrhea, vomiting, and dehydration. Death can occur within hours of the first symptoms. The disease spreads through contaminated water, which means that entire communities can be wiped out in a matter of days. Typhoid fever causes high fever, severe headaches, and often death. It spreads through contaminated food and water and can incubate for weeks before symptoms appear. By the time you realize you're sick, you've probably infected dozens of other people. The fever can reach temperatures high enough to cause brain damage. Dysentery causes severe diarrhea with blood and mucus, leading to dehydration and death. It's spread through contaminated water, poor sanitation, and close contact with infected individuals. In a frontier community with no sewage system, dysentery can spread to virtually everyone. Tuberculosis is a slow killer that attacks the lungs, causing a chronic cough, blood in the sputum, and gradual wasting away. It's highly contagious and spreads through airborne droplets. In close quarters like frontier towns and mining camps, tuberculosis can infect large numbers of people. Smallpox causes high fever and a distinctive rash that can leave survivors permanently scarred or blind. It's highly contagious and often fatal. There's no treatment, and vaccination is rarely available in frontier communities. Smallpox outbreaks can devastate entire populations. Malaria is spread by mosquitoes and causes recurring episodes of fever, chills, and weakness. The disease can persist for years, gradually weakening the victim until they die from complications. In areas with standing water, malaria is endemic, and almost everyone is infected. Yellow fever is also spread by mosquitoes and causes high fever, jaundice, and often death. The mortality rate is extremely high, and there's no treatment. Outbreaks of yellow fever can empty entire towns as people flee or die. Scurvy is caused by lack of vitamin C and results in bleeding gums, loose teeth, and eventually death. Fresh fruits and vegetables are rare in the Wild West, so scurvy is common, especially among people who travel long distances or work in isolated areas. Pellagra is caused by poor nutrition and results in skin problems, diarrhea, dementia, and death. The limited diet available in the Wild West doesn't provide adequate nutrition for most people, so pellagra and other nutritional diseases are common. Rabies is spread by animal bites and is almost always fatal once symptoms appear. The victim experiences anxiety, confusion, and violent behavior before dying in agony. There's no treatment, and the disease is common in areas with large populations of wild animals. Pneumonia kills many people who survive other diseases because their immune systems are weakened by poor nutrition, constant stress, and exposure to harsh conditions. The lack of warm, dry shelter makes pneumonia a constant threat, especially during cold weather. Infection from wounds, cuts, and injuries is extremely common because there are no antibiotics, no antiseptics, and no understanding of sterile technique. A simple cut can become infected, leading to amputation or death. Even minor injuries can be fatal if they become infected. Childbirth is extremely dangerous for both mother and child. The lack of medical care, sterile conditions, and pain relief makes pregnancy and delivery life-threatening experiences. Many women die in childbirth, and infant mortality rates are astronomical. Dental problems lead to serious infections because there's no dental care available. Tooth decay, abscesses, and gum disease can cause infections that spread to other parts of the body and cause death. What starts as a toothache can become a fatal infection. The lack of medical knowledge means that most treatments are ineffective or harmful. Bloodletting, purging, and other traditional treatments often make patients worse rather than better. People die from diseases that are easily treatable today. Mental illness is not understood and not treated. People suffering from depression, anxiety, or other mental health problems are often considered possessed, lazy, or morally defective. The stress of frontier life causes many people to develop serious mental health problems that go untreated. The combination of poor sanitation, contaminated water, inadequate nutrition, and close living quarters creates perfect conditions for disease outbreaks. When one person gets sick, everyone gets sick, and when diseases are often fatal, entire communities can be wiped out. Prevention consists mainly of hoping for the best. There's no understanding of germs, no effective quarantine procedures, and no public health measures. People get sick, people die, and everyone else just hopes they're not next. Welcome to Wild West medicine, where the cure is often worse than the disease, the treatment might kill you faster than the illness, and the best medical advice is to not get sick in the first place. When you do get sick or injured, which is inevitable in the Wild West, your medical options range from ineffective to life-threatening. The practice of medicine in the frontier is a combination of folk remedies, desperate improvisation, and procedures that would be considered torture in any civilized society. Doctors, when they exist, are often self-taught or have minimal training from medical schools that wouldn't qualify as high schools today. Their understanding of anatomy, physiology, and disease is limited and often completely wrong. They're more likely to kill you than cure you, but they're often the only option available. Surgery is performed without anesthesia except for alcohol, which doesn't provide adequate pain relief for major procedures. Patients are held down while doctors saw, cut, and stitch with tools that haven't been sterilized. The mortality rate from surgery is extremely high, mostly due to infection, shock, and blood loss. Amputations are common because gangrene and severe infections often require removing limbs to save lives. The procedure involves sawing through bone while the patient screams and struggles. Many patients die from shock, blood loss, or infection, but those who survive are left permanently disabled in a world that has no accommodation for disability. Dentistry consists mainly of pulling teeth with pliers when the pain becomes unbearable. There's no Novocaine, no understanding of sterile technique, and no way to replace extracted teeth. People often die from infections that start with dental problems and spread to other parts of the body. Childbirth is attended by midwives, who may or may not have any training or experience. Many women die in labor from complications that could be easily treated today. Babies who survive birth often die within their first year from diseases, malnutrition, or accidents. Broken bones are set by whoever claims to know how, often resulting in permanent deformity and disability. There's no X-ray technology to verify proper alignment, and no effective pain management during the setting process. Many broken bones heal incorrectly, leaving people with lifelong pain and limited mobility. Wound care consists of cleaning with whatever water is available and hoping for the best. There are no antibiotics, no antiseptics, and no understanding of how to prevent infection. Many people die from minor cuts that become infected because there's no way to fight bacterial infections. Burns from fires, cooking accidents, and industrial mishaps are treated with folk remedies that are often harmful rather than helpful. The lack of proper burn treatment means that even minor burns can become infected and life-threatening. Eye injuries and diseases often result in permanent blindness because there's no ophthalmological care available. Cataracts, glaucoma, and injuries to the eye cannot be treated effectively, leaving many people blind in a world where vision is essential for survival. Mental health problems are not recognized as medical conditions. People suffering from depression, anxiety, or other mental illness are considered morally defective or possessed by evil spirits. There's no treatment, no medication, and no understanding of psychological disorders. Pain management consists mainly of alcohol, opium when available, and the advice to tough it out. Chronic pain from injuries, arthritis, and other conditions is simply endured because there are no effective pain medications available. Medications, when they exist, are often more dangerous than the conditions they're supposed to treat. Mercury, arsenic, and other toxic substances are commonly used as medicine. Many people are poisoned by their treatments rather than cured by them. Medical equipment is primitive and often homemade. Surgical instruments are not sterilized, thermometers don't exist, and there's no way to accurately diagnose many conditions. Most medical diagnoses are educated guesses based on limited knowledge and observation. The cost of medical care when it's available is often beyond the means of most people. Doctors demand payment in advance and will often refuse to treat patients who can't pay. This means that many people suffer and die from treatable conditions simply because they can't afford medical care. Medical knowledge is based on superstition, tradition, and guesswork, rather than scientific understanding. The theory of humors, bloodletting, and other medieval practices are still common and often make patients worse rather than better. Quarantine procedures, when they exist, are ineffective and often inhumane. People with contagious diseases are isolated without adequate food, water, or care, often resulting in death from neglect rather than disease. The mortality rate from medical treatment is so high that many people prefer to take their chances with the disease rather than risk the cure. This is often a rational decision because many medical treatments are more likely to kill than cure. Preventive medicine consists mainly of folk wisdom, superstition, and hope. There's no understanding of nutrition, exercise, or lifestyle factors that affect health. People simply hope they don't get sick, because getting sick often means dying. Welcome to Wild West healthcare, where the treatment is often worse than the disease. Doctors are as likely to kill you as cure you, and the best medical advice is to stay healthy because once you get sick, your chances of recovery are slim to none. After experiencing a full day of heat, dust, dangerous animals, hostile humans, potential disease, and the constant threat of violence, you might think that sunset brings relief. Unfortunately, the Wild West doesn't believe in relief, and nighttime brings its own special collection of miseries designed to make you question every life choice that led you to this moment. Sleep is a luxury you can't afford in the Wild West, even though exhaustion is your constant companion. You need rest, but you also need to stay alive, and these two requirements are often mutually exclusive. Your bed consists of whatever you can improvise: a bedroll if you're lucky, the ground if you're not. Your bedroll is a thin blanket or canvas sheet that provides minimal cushioning against rocks, roots, and the general hostility of the earth beneath you. It's shared with insects, small animals, and whatever diseases they might be carrying. The blanket smells like everyone who's used it before you, and it hasn't been washed since it was manufactured. The ground is hard, uneven, and usually covered with things that poke, jab, or bite. Rocks seem to position themselves specifically to dig into your spine. Roots appear designed to catch your limbs at uncomfortable angles, and the earth itself radiates cold that seeps through any barrier you can create. Temperature regulation is impossible because the same clothes that were too hot during the day are now inadequate against the cold that descends like a punishment from an angry god. You shiver in garments still damp with sweat, and there's no additional covering available because everything you own is already being used. Sleep comes in fragments between checking for dangers, feeding the fire, and wondering what that sound was. You doze fitfully, never achieving deep sleep because deep sleep in the Wild West is often permanent. You wake up frequently to scan for threats, check your surroundings, and verify that you're still breathing. The darkness is absolute and filled with sounds that could indicate anything from a harmless rabbit to a hungry predator. Every crack of a twig could be a footstep. Every rustle of leaves could be something approaching, and every silence could mean something is stalking you. Guard duty is essential but exhausting. Someone has to stay awake to watch for human threats, animal predators, fires getting out of control, and weather changes. Everyone takes turns, but the person on guard is fighting sleep deprivation while trying to remain alert enough to detect danger. The fire provides light, warmth, and some protection from animals, but it also advertises your location to anyone within miles. Human predators are attracted to fires because fires indicate people, and people have things worth stealing. The fire is simultaneously your lifeline and your greatest vulnerability. Fuel for the fire is precious and limited. You burn whatever combustible material you can find: dried animal dung, sagebrush, anything that will produce heat and light. The fire smokes constantly, burning your eyes and throat, but you endure it because the alternative is freezing or being eaten. Wild animals are active at night, and they know where you are. Wolves howl in the distance, coyotes yip and bark, mountain lions scream like banshees, and bears lumber through the darkness, making sounds that suggest they're large, angry, and looking for trouble. Domestic animals, if you have any, are nervous and alert. Horses whinny and stamp, cattle low and shift restlessly, and dogs growl at shadows. These animals have better senses than humans, and their nervousness usually indicates that something is out there. Something that views your camp as either a threat or an opportunity. Human threats are just as dangerous as animal ones. Outlaws, bandits, claim jumpers, and other predators often attack at night when victims are tired, vulnerable, and less able to defend themselves. The darkness that hides you from them also hides them from you. Insects continue their assault throughout the night. Mosquitoes swarm around the fire, drawn by the light and the carbon dioxide from your breathing. Spiders emerge from hiding places to hunt, and some of them hunt things larger than insects. Scorpions become active and seek warm places like your bedroll. Sleep deprivation accumulates over time until you're barely functional. You make poor decisions, react slowly to threats, and become vulnerable to accidents and attacks. Chronic exhaustion affects your immune system, making you more susceptible to disease and less able to recover from injuries. The psychological impact of nighttime in the Wild West is severe. When you can't see beyond the circle of firelight, every sound becomes magnified, every shadow becomes a threat, and your imagination populates the darkness with dangers both real and imagined. Morning can't come soon enough, but when it does, you wake up tired, sore, and no more rested than when you went to sleep. The cycle begins again with another day of heat, work, danger, and the knowledge that you have to survive it all over again. Dreams, when they come, are often nightmares filled with the violence, disease, and death that surround your waking hours. There's no escape from the reality of frontier life, even in sleep, because sleep brings its own fears and anxieties. Welcome to a Wild West night, where rest is impossible, peace is non-existent, and survival depends on your ability to stay awake enough to detect threats while being exhausted enough that you no longer care what happens to you. The harsh realities of daily survival in the Wild West pale in comparison to the ultimate reality that most people who venture into the frontier don't make it out alive. The mortality rate is staggering, and death comes in so many different forms that it's impossible to protect against all of them. Accidents are the leading cause of death because everything in the Wild West is designed to hurt you. Horse-related accidents kill more people than gunfights. Falls from cliffs, buildings, and moving vehicles are common and usually fatal because there's no emergency medical care available. Drowning occurs frequently because people are forced to cross rivers, streams, and other bodies of water without boats, bridges, or swimming skills. Flash floods can appear without warning and sweep away people, animals, and entire communities. Fire kills people directly through burns and indirectly through destruction of shelter, food supplies, and protection from the elements. Building fires, cooking fires, and wildfires all pose constant threats in an environment where everything is dry and combustible. Disease and infection kill more people than all forms of violence combined. The combination of poor sanitation, contaminated water, inadequate nutrition, and lack of medical care creates perfect conditions for epidemics that can wipe out entire communities. Violence accounts for a significant percentage of deaths, but not always in the dramatic gunfights portrayed in movies. Most violence is sudden, brutal, and over quickly. People are shot, stabbed, beaten, or simply disappear without a trace. Starvation and malnutrition weaken people and make them vulnerable to other causes of death. When food supplies run out, people make desperate decisions that often lead to their deaths. The frontier doesn't provide enough resources to support the number of people trying to survive there. Exposure to extreme weather kills people who are caught unprepared. Heat stroke, hypothermia, and dehydration are common causes of death. The weather changes quickly, and people often don't have adequate shelter, clothing, or supplies to survive sudden changes. Suicide rates are high because many people reach the point where they prefer death to continued suffering. The isolation, desperation, and constant struggle for survival drive many people to take their own lives rather than continue fighting. Maternal and infant mortality rates are astronomical because childbirth is extremely dangerous and medical care is non-existent. Many women die in labor, and those who survive often lose their babies to disease, malnutrition, or accidents. Industrial accidents kill workers in mines, mills, and other dangerous occupations. Safety regulations don't exist, protective equipment isn't available, and employers view workers as expendable resources rather than human beings. Animal attacks account for numerous deaths as predators view humans as either threats or food sources. Large animals kill through physical force, while smaller animals kill through venom or disease transmission. The average life expectancy in the Wild West is significantly lower than in civilized areas. People age rapidly under the constant stress of survival, and few live to see old age. Those who do survive are often disabled by injuries, disease, or the accumulated effects of hard living. Children have an especially high mortality rate because they're vulnerable to all the same threats as adults but with less knowledge, experience, and physical capability to protect themselves. Many families lose multiple children to disease, accidents, or violence. The psychological toll of constant exposure to death and danger affects everyone. Survivors' guilt, depression, and other mental health problems are common but not recognized or treated. People become hardened to death because it's so common, but this hardening comes at the cost of their humanity. Burial practices are simple and often hurried because there's no time for elaborate ceremonies and little material for caskets or markers. Many people are buried in unmarked graves or simply left where they died if recovery of the body is too dangerous. Record keeping is poor, so many deaths go unrecorded. People simply disappear and are eventually presumed dead, but there's no official documentation of their fate. This makes it difficult to know exactly how many people died, but estimates suggest that the majority of people who entered the frontier didn't survive. The frontier attracts people who are already desperate or on the margins of society, so many people arrive already weakened by poverty, disease, or other problems. This makes them even more vulnerable to the dangers of frontier life. Medical knowledge is so limited that many deaths could be prevented with basic modern medical care. Simple infections, treatable diseases, and minor injuries become fatal because there's no effective treatment available. The constant threat of death affects every decision people make. Where to travel, where to live, what work to do, and who to associate with are all influenced by considerations of survival rather than personal preference or ambition. Family structures are disrupted by high mortality rates. Many children are orphaned, many spouses are widowed, and many families are destroyed by death. The social fabric that holds communities together is constantly being torn apart by loss. Welcome to Wild West mortality, where death is a constant companion, life expectancy is measured in months rather than years, and survival is the only victory that matters. The frontier is littered with the bones of people who thought they could conquer the West, but instead were conquered by it. As you lie on your thin bedroll, staring at the star-filled sky through eyes burning with exhaustion and dust, you might wonder how anyone ever survived the Wild West long enough to tell tales about it. The answer is simple: most people didn't. The romantic vision of the Wild West that Hollywood has sold us is built on the stories of the tiny percentage of people who not only survived but thrived in this hostile environment. But for every famous gunslinger, every successful rancher, every legendary lawman, there were hundreds of people who died anonymous deaths from mundane causes. The reality is that you wouldn't survive a day in the Wild West, not because you lacked courage or determination, but because survival required a specific set of skills, knowledge, and luck that most modern people simply don't possess. You don't know how to find water in the desert, how to treat a rattlesnake bite, or how to defend yourself against armed predators. You don't understand the subtle signs that indicate weather changes, animal behavior, or human threats. You can't read the landscape to find food, shelter, or safety. You don't know which plants are edible, which animals are dangerous, or which people can be trusted. Your modern sensibilities about hygiene, comfort, and safety would be not just useless, but actively harmful in an environment where such luxuries can get you killed. Your expectation of medical care, legal protection, and social safety nets would be disappointed in the most brutal possible way. The physical demands of frontier life would exhaust you within hours. The mental stress would break you within days. The constant threat of death would drive you to desperation within weeks, assuming you survived that long. Even if you somehow possessed all the necessary skills and knowledge, the odds would still be stacked against you. The frontier was a graveyard that consumed lives with ruthless efficiency. Survival was largely a matter of luck, and luck eventually runs out for everyone. The people who did survive were often fundamentally changed by the experience. The frontier stripped away civilization, refinement, and often humanity itself. People became hard, cruel, and ruthless, because those were the qualities required for survival. The Wild West wasn't a place for heroes and adventures. It was a place where civilization went to die, and took most of its inhabitants with it. The few who survived did so not by being noble or brave, but by being tougher, more ruthless, and luckier than everyone else. The frontier closed not because it was conquered, but because it consumed so many lives that eventually there weren't enough people willing to enter it. The railroad, telegraph, and other technologies eventually made parts of the West safer, but for decades it remained a death trap that lured people to their doom with promises of freedom and opportunity. Modern people like to imagine they would have been among the survivors, the ones who would have thrived in that harsh environment. But the truth is that most of us would have been among the forgotten casualties, the unmarked graves, the people who simply disappeared into the vast emptiness of the frontier. The Wild West represents humanity at its most basic level, stripped of the protections and comforts of civilization and forced to confront the brutal realities of survival in a hostile environment. Most people, when faced with those realities, didn't rise to meet the challenge, they were crushed by it. So the next time you watch a Western or read a story about the frontier, remember that for every hero on screen, there were hundreds of people who died anonymous deaths from disease, exposure, accidents, and violence. The Wild West wasn't an adventure. It was a meat grinder that consumed human lives with industrial efficiency. The romance of the frontier is built on amnesia about the reality of what life was actually like for the vast majority of people who experienced it. The survivors who lived to tell their stories were the exceptions, not the rule, and their tales of adventure and heroism obscure the mundane reality of mass death and suffering. You wouldn't survive a day in the Wild West, not because you're weak, but because the Wild West was designed to kill people, and it was very good at its job. The few who survived were either incredibly lucky, incredibly skilled, or incredibly ruthless, and most modern people are none of those things. Welcome to the real Wild West, where heroes died young, villains died younger, and most people just died. The frontier didn't build character, it buried it, along with the people who possessed it. And if you think you would have been different, well, that's exactly what they all thought too. The sun sets on another day in the frontier, and if you've somehow managed to survive this long, you've beaten odds that would make lottery tickets look like sure bets. But survival isn't victory, it's just postponing the inevitable in a land where the house always wins and the house wants you dead. The Wild West wasn't just a place, it was a process, a mechanism for separating the weak from the strong, the lucky from the unlucky, the living from the dead. And in that process, most people discovered they weren't as strong or as lucky as they thought they were. So sleep well if you can, in your thin bedroll on the hard ground, surrounded by darkness and danger. Because tomorrow brings another chance to discover new ways to die in America's most unforgiving landscape. And if you're very lucky, very skilled, and very careful, you might survive just long enough to realize that survival isn't enough. The Wild West doesn't care about your dreams, your ambitions, or your plans. It only cares about one thing, whether you can stay alive in a world designed to kill you. And for most people, the answer to that question was written in the dust long before they ever set foot on the frontier. Welcome to the real Wild West, where the only happy ending is living long enough to leave.